Imagine driving down a quiet road at night, the headlights flickering over long-forgotten houses and empty fields. The kind of road you've traveled many times without ever thinking twice about it. But tonight, you're not just traveling this road for the scenery. You're about to hear 9 of the most terrifying true stories from across America. Stories that didn't happen in the far-off corners of the world, but right here, in places that seem familiar, even safe. From eerie encounters in the wild woods of the Northeast to the unsettling silence of old, crumbling buildings in the Midwest, these are the stories that have been hidden in plain sight. The places that shouldn't be haunted, but are. The people who shouldn't have crossed paths with something they couldn't explain, but did. As you listen, keep your eyes open, because some of these stories might just make you question whether that knock at your door tonight is someone or something you can't escape. Every cop has a case that breaks them. For me, it was a house in Virginia, a mansion in the richest part of town that felt like stepping into a nightmare. I used to be a police officer in a city in Virginia, and I thought I'd seen it all, but nothing prepared me for the call that night. A 19-year-old girl, Emily, found dead in a basement that reeked of death. I immediately had an uneasy feeling about the house, like it was alive, watching me. That place had a history. A doctor who used to live in one of those homes died in a way no one could explain. What I saw in that house, and what happened to Emily's family after, still keeps me up at night. Stay with me, because this story will haunt you too. It was a cold, rainy night when my radio crackled with the call. A young woman found dead in the upscale neighborhood. The address sent a chill down my spine. That house, the one every rookie cop heard stories about. There is one upscale neighborhood in our city with very nice homes. I was always told stories when I was a new officer that there was a doctor who used to live in one of those homes. The story goes that the doctor attempted to perform some type of operation on himself. He numbed his stomach area to make an incision on himself, but since he couldn't feel it, he accidentally cut too far into deep and accidentally disabled himself. When officers and paramedics arrived, he was found barely alive, holding his own intestines, and ultimately died. Decades later, the mansion still stood, pristine but wrong, like a predator waiting for prey. As I pulled up, I immediately had an uneasy feeling about the house. Well, on the outside, it just had bad energy surrounding it, I suppose. The front porch was a mess. Countless empty energy drink cans and a Ouija board on the front patio table. My gut screamed to turn back, but duty called. Inside, Emily's family was shattered. Her mother sobbing, her father staring blankly, her sister, Claire, trembling as she led me to the basement. The basement was unfinished and was fairly dark, minus 2 pool string light bulbs, one on each side of the basement. The air was heavy, suffocating. Energy drink cans were everywhere, and another Ouija board was on a small coffee table. Then I saw her, Emily, who was 19 if I remember correctly, was hanging by her neck on a basement rafter. She had unfortunately ended her own life with an exercise band and was swinging back and forth slightly. Her eyes were open, lifeless, but the room felt alive, like something was watching, waiting for me to make a wrong move. I've seen death before, but this was different. The basement wasn't just a crime scene, it was a trap. Every creak, every shadow made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily wasn't alone when she died, that something had pushed her to that rope. My partner stayed upstairs, but I felt exposed, like the house knew my fears. I wanted to run, but I had to stay. For Emily, for her family, for answers. Back upstairs, the family's grief was suffocating. Claire, Emily's older sister, pulled me aside, her voice barely a whisper. Her older sister said that Emily indeed had been obsessed with the Ouija board, drinking energy drinks, to stay up all night and talk to what she believed was her boyfriend who was dead. Her sister stated that Emily had been saying that her boyfriend was begging for her to come join him in the afterlife. But Claire's eyes were wide with fear, not just grief. "It wasn't him," she said, clutching my arm. I heard it too. The voice on that board. It knew things, private things about Emily, about us. It wasn't her boyfriend. Claire told me Emily had changed in the months before her death. She'd always been bright, a college freshman with dreams of becoming a writer. But after moving into that house, she became withdrawn, paranoid. All she ever did was drink energy drinks to stay up all hours of the night playing on the Ouija board. Claire found her in the basement at 3 a.m., eyes glazed, talking to the board like it was alive. Emily swore her boyfriend, who died in a car crash 2 years earlier, was speaking to her, begging her to join him. Claire tried to take the board away, but Emily screamed, saying it was all she had left. The night she died, Claire heard her whispering in the basement, not to a person but to something. When she went to check, Emily was already gone. I asked Claire about the house, hoping for clues. She said it felt like a weight on her chest from the day they moved in. Everything about this house just felt off and wrong. Doors would creak open. At night, lights flickered for no reason. And the basement, God, the basement was the worst. Even their dog refused to go down there, growling at the stairs. Claire's parents had tried to help Emily, sending her to therapy, confiscating the energy drinks, but nothing worked. The house, Claire said, wanted her. As a cop, I was trained to look for logic, drugs, mental illness, a bad crowd. But nothing added up. Emily's talk screen was clean. Her therapist said she was stable until the Ouija obsession began. The Ouija boards themselves were pristine, not store-bought junk, almost like they'd been placed there. I left that house with more questions than answers, my mind racing. I had a very uneasy and sick feeling being in that basement, and not because of the dead body. After all, it definitely wasn't my first. This case wasn't just a tragedy, it was a puzzle, and I was determined to solve it. 2 weeks later, my radio blared again. A car accident with ejection, lights, and sirens. I raced to the scene. A quiet road, now a nightmare of twisted metal. Convertible BMW sat upside down, its roof torn off. In the driver's seat was a woman who clearly had a broken neck, as her head was almost all the way turned around. 25 feet away, a man's body lay in the grass, thrown from the car. Upon obtaining the man's ID, I read the information off to the dispatch, and then another officer. And I both realized the same thing at the same time. These two people, they were Emily's parents. 2 weeks to the day, just died in a horrible way. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just bad luck, it felt orchestrated. The crash was brutal, no skid marks, no witnesses. The driver's side window was shattered, but the coroner found no glass in the wounds, like something else caused the impact. I kept picturing Emily's face in that basement, her eyes staring into nothing. Breaking the news to Claire was torture. I tell you that breaking the news to the older sister was absolutely heartbreaking. In fact, I kept in touch with her for a little while after this. Her screams echoed in my head, a sound I couldn't unhear. She ended up selling off everything and buying a different house to try and start over and repair her broken life. But the nightmare wasn't over. A month later, another call. A pedestrian hit by a car. I prayed it wasn't her, but deep down I knew. Another officer was called after a pedestrian was struck by a car while she was jogging in her neighborhood. And yes, you guessed it, it was the sister. She managed to survive several weeks in a coma. But ultimately, she just didn't make it. Claire lingered in the ICU, machines beeping, her face bruised but peaceful. The driver claimed she appeared out of nowhere, like a ghost crossing his path. I sat by her bedside, guilt gnawing at me. I should have done more, warned her, something. In her hospital room, I found a crumpled energy drink can under the bed, like a cruel joke. No one remembered it being there. I couldn't let it go. The house that Emily killed herself in was the same house that the doctor lived in. That connection haunted me. I dug into the property records, spending nights poring over dusty files in the county office. The house had a history, tenants who vanished, families torn apart by tragedy, all tied to that address. A fire in the 1920s, a murder-suicide in the 60s, and always reports of bad vibes. Neighbors avoided it. Kids dared each other to knock on the door. I interviewed an old sergeant who'd responded to the doctor's case. He said the scene was worse than reported. Blood on the walls, strange symbols carved into the floor. He retired after that call. Said the house got in his head. I started noticing things myself. Driving home, I'd see energy drink cans on the roadside, always the same brand Emily used. Twice now I found 2 different Ouija board planchettes. On the sidewalk when going to check my mail, I never touch them, obviously, and usually use a stick or something to push them into the storm drain. Each time, I felt that basement's weight again, like the house was following me. My wife noticed. I was different, distant, checking locks obsessively. I didn't tell her everything, but she knew. This case was eating me alive, and I was running out of time to figure out why. I left the force a year later, burned out and broken. I'm no longer a police officer. I moved a couple of states away. I thought distance would help, but the house clung to me like a shadow. Twice now I found 2 different Ouija board planchettes on the sidewalk. When going to check my mail, I never touch them, obviously, and usually use a stick or something to push them into the storm drain. Each one brought back that basement. Emily's lifeless eyes, Claire's screams. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, haunted by the question, why them? Why that house? I tracked down Claire's therapist, hoping for answers. She told me Emily had been terrified in her final sessions, saying the house spoke to her, not through the Ouija board, but in her dreams. She'd wake up to whispers, footsteps, the sound of energy drinks rolling across the floor. The therapist thought it was psychosis, but I wasn't so sure. I visited the house one last time, now abandoned, its windows boarded up. Standing on the lawn, I felt it again. That suffocating weight, like the air itself was alive with malice. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. But I took a photo. And when I looked at it later, there was a shadow in the upstairs window, too tall, too still to be human. I deleted it and never went back. The house is still there, sold to new owners who don't know its history. I check the news sometimes, bracing for another tragedy. So far, nothing, but I know it's only a matter of time. I've talked to other cops, old-timers who've seen things they can't explain. One told me about a case in the 80s. A family in that same neighborhood, same pattern. Ouija boards, accidents, a feeling of being watched. He said some places are just wrong, like they're built on something broken. I don't know if I believe in curses, but I believe in that house. This case changed me. I used to think I could handle anything. Murders, shootouts, the worst of humanity. But this was different. It wasn't just death. It was a pattern, a force that tore a family apart and left me questioning everything. I started volunteering at a crisis center, helping families like Emily's trying to make sense of my own guilt. I learned that grief can consume you, but so can obsession. That house fed on both, and I almost let it take me too. Here's what I want you to take away: trust your instincts. If a place feels wrong, don't ignore it. Everything about this house just felt off and wrong, and I should have listened to that feeling the first time I stepped inside. Check on your loved ones, ask the hard questions, and don't let them face their demons alone. Emily's family. Might still be here if someone had seen the signs earlier. And if you're struggling, if you feel like something's following you, talk to someone. You don't have to fight it alone. I'm sharing this because I need you to understand. Some tragedies aren't random. They're warnings. That house is still out there and others like it. Have you been in a place that made your skin crawl? Where the air felt heavy with secrets? Maybe it was a house, a room, an empty lot. Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else avoid what Emily's family went through. And if you want to hear more cases that changed me, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. This job showed me the world's darker corners, but it also taught me we can shine a light in them. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and don't let the darkness win. You're 13, tearing through the woods on your dirt bike, the roar of the engine drowning out everything else. You know this trail like your own heartbeat, every curve, every jump. But what if one day a new path appears? One you've never seen? One that feels wrong. That's what happened to me, and it changed everything. My name's Ethan, and in the summer of 1998, a single ride in the Virginia woods turned my world upside down, leaving me questioning reality itself. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. Some paths aren't meant to be taken. I grew up in a fairly rural area of Virginia as a kid. I had an obsession for dirt bikes, watching motocross on TV, the X Games, reading Racer X magazines. It was all I thought about. My parents' house backed onto a dense forest, a tangle of pines and oaks stretching for miles. The trail behind our place was my escape, a 15-minute point-to-point path I'd ride for hours, mastering every rut and hill. I would ride back and forth for hours pretty much every day. I ended up learning that trail like the back of my hand. The locals called the woods the Hollow, a place where compasses spun and cell signals died. My dad warned me to stick to the trail, but at 13, I thought I was invincible. That summer, something strange started happening. I started having this reoccurring dream I would be riding my dirt bike along that familiar trail when suddenly, there would be a new intersection, a brand new trail to go down. In the dream, I'd follow it to a clearing, a perfect circle of grass where I felt this urge to find something. But every time I got close, I'd wake up, heart pounding. The image of that clearing burned into my mind. The dreams came every night, so vivid I'd check my boots for mud in the morning. My mom noticed I was distracted, but I brushed it off. How do you explain a dream that feels more real than life? By July, the dreams were relentless. I couldn't shake the feeling that the woods were pulling me in. One humid afternoon, I hopped on my bike, the familiar buzz of the engine calming my nerves. I flew down the trail, dodging roots, the world a blur of green and brown. But as I crested a hill, I slammed on the brakes, skidding sideways. I saw it there all of a sudden was the intersection. A new trail, straight as an arrow, cutting through the forest. It was impossible. There'd never been another path here. My mouth went dry, my pulse racing. I stared down the trail, its end lost in shadow. Every instinct told me to turn back, but the dreams whispered, "Go." I gripped the handlebars, took a shaky breath, and rode into the unknown, not knowing I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The new trail felt wrong from the start. The dirt was too smooth, the trees too still, like the forest was holding its breath. I rode slowly, third gear, my hands trembling on the handlebars. I drove down the trail, staying in third gear, slow and steady. The trail was completely straight. The air turned chilly, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic like rust. My bike's engine sounded distant, muffled by the dense canopy. I glanced back, hoping to see the familiar trail, but it was gone, just a wall of trees. My stomach dropped. This wasn't right. After about a minute, the trail ended and I saw it. I reached the clearing that is the exact clearing that I always saw in my dreams. A perfect circle, 50 feet wide, surrounded by towering pines. The grass was oddly vibrant, almost glowing under the gray sky. I stopped, kicked down the stand, and killed the engine. The silence was crushing. No birds, no rustling leaves, just my own ragged breathing. I took off my helmet, looking around. What the heck, I whispered to myself. I stepped into the clearing, my boots sinking slightly, and that's when the feeling hit me. I began to feel an eerie feeling, though, all of a sudden, as if I was being watched. A feeling of dread and danger suddenly crept up the back of my neck. I circled the clearing, heart pounding, looking for anything to explain this place. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches like fingers reaching for me. My skin prickled, every sound amplified, my footsteps, my breath, the faint creak of my bike cooling down. I told myself it was just nerves, but the dread was real, clawing at my chest. I needed to leave. I grabbed my helmet, fumbling to put it on, and kicked the starter. The engine sputtered, then roared. I sped back down the trail, desperate to escape the oppressive weight of that place. But the trail wouldn't end. I rode for a few minutes when it suddenly hit me, though. Why the heck is it taking so long to get back? It should have taken a minute, but my watch showed 5 minutes, then 10. The trees blurred past, but the path kept going, twisting in ways it hadn't before. Panic surged. I spun the bike around, thinking I'd missed the turn, but when I did, the clearing was there again, closer than it should have been. My hands shook as I realized I was trapped, looping back to the same cursed spot. Sweat stung my eyes, my breath coming in gasps. I wanted to scream, but my voice felt stuck, swallowed by the forest. All I could do was ride again, praying I'd find my way out before whatever was watching me decided to show itself. I was losing it. The clearing loomed ahead again, its unnatural glow mocking me. My bike's engine whined as I pushed it harder, the trail stretching endlessly. My mind raced. How was this possible? I'd ridden this forest 1,000 times, but now it was a maze, bending time and space. I stopped, got off my bike, feeling defeated, confused, and a little bit scared now. My legs buckled, and I slumped against a tree, helmet clattering to the ground. Tears blurred my vision as I stared at the endless trail. The forest was silent, but the weight of being watched pressed harder, like eyes boring into my skull. I forced myself to stand, kick-starting the bike with shaking hands. I rode, again slower this time, scanning for any sign of the familiar trail. Minutes dragged on, each second stretching into eternity. Then, like a miracle, the trees parted, and I burst onto my familiar trail, my blessed familiar trail. Relief flooded me, but my body was still shaking. I didn't look back, just gunned it toward home, the forest a blur. When I reached my backyard, I parked the bike and stumbled inside, legs like jelly. "Hi, honey," my mom said. "I'm sorry, I don't know what happened, I just lost track of time." I managed to get out. "Well, it's only been an hour. I'm surprised you're already back inside, actually." I froze, my breath catching. I stood there, mouth agape, staring at my mom. An hour. It felt like hours, days even. My mom's face softened with concern. "You okay, sweetie?" she asked, her voice gentle. I mumbled something about being tired and dragged myself to my room, collapsing on the bed. I spent the next few days confused, replaying every moment through my head. The clearing, the dread, the endless trail. It didn't make sense. I checked my watch, my bike, even the trail's entrance, but everything was normal, like nothing had happened. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow looked like that clearing. I stopped riding for days, the bike sitting untouched in the garage. My dad asked what was wrong, but I couldn't explain it. How do you tell someone you got lost in a place that shouldn't exist? I felt different, like a piece of me was still stuck in that forest. My grades slipped and my friends noticed I was distant. I kept asking myself, why me? Why that trail? The questions gnawed at me, but the answers were out there in the hollow, and I wasn't sure I had the courage to face them again. The hollow wouldn't let me go. I spent the next few days confused, replaying every moment through my head. I wanted to just make sense of, well, everything, to have some logical reason for it all, but there just wasn't any. I tried to move on, but the memory of that clearing haunted me. I'd catch myself staring out my window at the forest, half expecting the intersection to appear. My mom thought I was just stressed, but my best friend Jake saw through it. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said one day. I didn't tell him the truth, not yet, but his words stuck with me. I couldn't live with the questions. Why had the trail appeared? What was in that clearing? I needed answers, even if it meant going back. In the end, I devised a plan, though, that looking back was honestly incredibly stupid, but I couldn't live with not knowing what the heck happened to me in those woods that day. My dad had a giant spool of yellow rope in the garage, 600 feet of it, perfect for marking my way. I decided that I was going to use that rope, tie it to a tree at the intersection, and then ride back down the trail to investigate. I'd tie one end to my waist, secure the spool to a tree, and follow the rope back, no matter what. It felt foolproof, a way to stay grounded in a place that defied reality. I told Jake my plan, expecting him to talk me out of it. Instead, he insisted on coming, saying he'd watch the rope from the intersection. We set out early, the forest shrouded in morning. Mist. My hands shook as I tied the rope to a tree at the intersection, Jake giving me a nervous nod. I rode down the trail, slower this time, the rope trailing behind me. The clearing appeared faster than before, its eerie glow unchanged. I stopped, heart hammering, and stepped into the circle. The dread hit me instantly, stronger now, like the forest knew I'd returned. I scanned the trees looking for anything, a sign, a clue, but found nothing but that suffocating silence. Then I heard it, a faint rustling, like footsteps circling the clearing. My breath caught as I gripped the rope, my lifeline. The rustling grew closer and I felt it again, that piercing sense of being watched. My pulse raced, my body screaming to run. I turned to leave, but the rope went taut, then slack. I yanked it, expecting resistance, but it came loose, severed clean. Panic surged. I sprinted to my bike, kick-starting it with trembling hands, and tore down the trail. The forest seemed to close in, branches scraping my arms, but I didn't stop until I reached Jake, who was pale, clutching the frayed end of the rope. "It just broke," he stammered. We ran, not looking back until we were safe at home. Back home, I was a wreck. The severed rope lay in a heap on my bedroom floor, its frayed end a reminder of how close I'd come to being lost again. Jake wouldn't talk about it, his eyes haunted as he left for home. I didn't blame him. The hollow had marked us both, but I felt it deeper, like it had reached inside me. I threw my helmet and collapsed next to a tree, sobbing on my knees. I let out a frustrated and terrified scream. That moment in the clearing replayed endlessly. Those footsteps, the dread, the rope snapping. I'd gone looking for answers and found only fear. I told my parents I'd crashed my bike, too ashamed to admit the truth. My dad went to the trail to check, but found nothing. No intersection, no clearing, just the same old path. I woke up back on my familiar trail, the intersection now gone, the rope now gone, no trace of anything was left. It was like the forest had erased itself, leaving me to question my sanity. But the fear was real, and so was the change in me. I stopped riding, the bike gathering dust. I couldn't look at the woods without my heart racing. Couldn't sleep without checking the locks. My grades tanked, and my mom started talking about therapy. Months later, I confided in Jake's older brother, a park ranger who knew the Hollow's history. He didn't laugh. "People get lost in there," he said. "Not just physically, the place messes with your head." He told me about hikers who'd wandered off trails, claiming time slipped away, and old logging camps where workers vanished. In the 1800s, no one had answers, but the stories matched mine too closely to ignore. He urged me to stay away, to let it go. I nodded, but part of me still wondered, what had I stumbled into? Years passed and I moved on, but the Hollow never left me. I'm older now, living in the city, far from those woods. But every so often I dream of that clearing, feel that dread creeping up my spine. I feel like something is missing in me, as if that thing took something from me. I've learned to live with it, to channel the fear into caution. I tell my story not for thrills, but as a lesson. Some places are better left alone. If you're ever on a trail and see a path that shouldn't be there, don't take it. Trust your gut, turn back, and don't look over your shoulder. Because once you step into the unknown, it might not let you go. I was 13 when I found a trail that didn't belong, a path that appeared out of nowhere in the woods I'd ridden my whole life. One wrong turn, and I was face to face with something that wasn't human, something with eyes that burned through me, and a smile that promised I'd never be whole again. This isn't a ghost story, it's what happened to me, and it's why I'll never ride those woods again. Growing up in rural Virginia, my world was dirt bikes. I'd ride back and forth for hours pretty much every day on a single trail behind my parents' house, a point-to-point path I knew like the back of my hand. I ended up learning that trail like the back of my hand, where every tree root was, where every turn was, where every rut was. But at 13, I started having a recurring dream. I would be riding my dirt bike along that familiar trail, when suddenly there would be a new intersection, a brand new trail to go down. In the dream, I'd ride to a clearing feeling like I was supposed to find something, but I'd always wake up before I could. One afternoon, I was out riding, the trail as familiar as my own pulse. I crested a small hill, expecting the usual stretch of dirt, but there it was, an intersection just like my dream. I locked my rear brakes, causing the rear end to slide sideways slightly. My heart pounded as I stared down this new trail, straight and dark like it was carved by something unnatural. Looking down the trail, I couldn't see the end of it. It went straight for about 50 yards, but I couldn't make out what was at the end. Was it always here? Had I just missed it? My gut churned, urging me to turn back, but the pull was stronger. I had to know. I cut the engine, the silence of the woods crashing over me. The air felt wrong, too still, too cold for spring. I sat there, bike idling, debating. I told myself that if it was there again tomorrow, then I would go down it. But the trail seemed to whisper, daring me to follow. I couldn't sleep that night, the image of that path haunting me. By morning I was back, my palms sweaty as I rode to the spot. The intersection was still there, unchanged, like it was waiting. I shifted into third gear, slow and cautious, and started down the trail. The trees closed in, their branches scraping my shoulders, the light dimming with every yard. My breath fogged, the air growing colder, heavier. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably a minute, I reached it. The clearing itself was a perfect circle around 50 ft in diameter. It was surrounded by dense forest. The clearing was silent, the air thick with an eerie glow that didn't come from the sun. I stepped off my bike, my boots sinking into the grass, and felt it. A presence like the forest was watching. This wasn't just a place, it was a trap, and I'd walked right into it. In the clearing, the world felt wrong. I took off my helmet, looking around what the heck I whispered to myself. The grass was too perfect, the trees too dense, their branches knitting a cage around the circle. A faint glow hung in the air, sourceless, like the forest was breathing light. I walked the edge, my steps heavy, each one sinking into the earth like it was pulling me down. I began to feel an eerie feeling, though, all of a sudden, as if I was being watched. My neck prickled, a cold dread crawling up my spine, whispering that I shouldn't be here. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe hunters made this place, or it was an old campsite. But then I saw it. A patch of grass in the center, crushed flat like something heavy had slithered across it. I knelt, touching the blades. They were warm, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. My chest tightened. I stood scanning the trees and heard it. A low, rasping chuckle, like bones grinding together. It came from nowhere, everywhere, burrowing into my skull. "Who's out there?" I shouted, my voice thin, swallowed by the silence. The chuckle, sharpened, mocking, closer now. I spun, expecting a prankster, but the clearing was empty. The air grew heavy, pressing my lungs, making each breath a fight. I threw my helmet back on, not bothering to buckle it, and I kick-started my dirt bike, bringing life back to the motor. The engine's roar was my anchor, cutting through the suffocating quiet. I peeled out, racing back down the trail, the chuckle chasing me, growing wilder, more unhinged. But the trail wouldn't end. It took less than a minute to reach the clearing, yet I've been riding down this trail for what felt like several minutes, and I hadn't met back up with my familiar trail. The trees blurred, the path stretching endlessly, twisting into a maze. Panic surged. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop. The chuckle vanished, replaced by footsteps, slow, heavy, crunching just beyond the trees. My eyes darted, catching shadows flitting between trunks, too fast to follow. Something was circling me, playing with me like a cat with a mouse. I turned, the bike desperate to retrace my path, but the trail had changed, narrower, darker. The trees leaning in like they were alive. I rode and rode, never making it back to the intersection. My breath burned, the cold air stinging my lungs. I stopped again, collapsing against a tree, my helmet falling to the dirt. I let out a frustrated and terrified scream. I guess I sat there trying to think of what to do next. The footsteps stopped, but the silence was worse. Alive, watching, waiting. I closed my eyes, begging this to be a nightmare, but when I opened them, the forest was darker, the sun lower, time slipping away like sand. I was trapped, and whatever was out there knew it. My only thought was survival. But the woods had other plans, and they weren't letting me go. I slumped against the tree, my sobs echoing in the unnatural silence. I'm not sure how long I sat there for, but it felt like hours. My mind scrambled for answers. Maybe I'd gotten lost, hit my head, dreamed it all. But that chuckle, the warm grass, it was real. I forced myself to stand, grabbing my bike, when a new sound stopped me cold. A whisper, sharp and venomous, slicing through the air. "Stay," it hissed, so close I felt it on my skin. I spun, but the trees stared back, their shadows twisting into shapes that weren't right. My bike's engine was still warm, but I couldn't ride, not yet. I needed a way out. My dad was a bit of a tool connoisseur. Any tool hardware, rope, bungee cords, He was your guy. And among his collection, he had a giant spool of yellow rope, around 600 FT of it. I could use it, tie it to a tree, guide myself back. I rode home, the trail finally releasing me to my familiar path. My mom said, "I'm surprised you're already back inside, actually." I didn't tell her what happened. How could I explain the unexplainable? The next day, I grabbed the rope, tying it around my waist and securing the spool to a tree at the intersection with bungee cords. I headed back down the trail feeling a new boost of confidence and determination. The clearing appeared faster, its glow dimmer, the air thicker. I stepped off my bike, hand on the rope, and saw it. A tree, black and charred, its bark peeling like burned flesh. Flaky black scorch marks covered the tree. The air grew icy, the whisper returning, now a chorus, urging me closer. Then something moved. Something began slowly peeking its head out from behind it. The face was black, burned, decayed, and not human, almost like a bad imitation of one. It had short, wiry black hair that looked oily and covered in soot. Its eyes met mine, endless voids gleaming with hunger. As soon as its eyes met mine, my dirt bike's motor shut off all of a sudden. The silence was crushing. The thing stepped forward, its body rippling, barely holding shape, its smile too wide, dripping black ichor. "You came back," it rasped, its voice a scream trapped in a whisper. I sprinted to my bike, kick-starting it, the roar my only lifeline. The creature laughed, a sound that clawed my mind, promising pain. I raced down the trail, rope taut, but the laughter followed, its footsteps matching my speed. This wasn't a ghost, it was a predator and I was its prey. The trail twisted, the trees closing in, their branches like claws. The rope was my anchor, but the creature's presence was everywhere, its voice seeping into my thoughts, urging me to stop, to give in. I pushed harder, the pain in my chest ignored, knowing one mistake would be my last. The clearing wasn't just a place, it was its domain, and I'd walked into its trap twice. The trail blurred as I gunned the bike, the rope around my waist pulling tight. I rode as fast as I could, the image of the thing's eyes burned into my mind. The creature's laughter chased me, a jagged, unhinged sound that echoed inside my skull. The trees whipped past, their branches clawing my skin, but the trail stretched on, endless, twisting like a living thing. My lungs burned, my hands trembled, but I couldn't stop. The rope was my only hope, a fragile link to the world I knew. Then it happened. In my haste to leave, I had created way too much slack in the rope. When heading back the opposite direction, I was shifting gears, going faster and faster, when suddenly the rope caught my chain. My rear wheel locked, and I was sent straight over the handlebars. I hit the ground hard, pain searing my ribs. The bike skidded into the brush, engine dead. Frantically, I looked around for the rest of the rope, the end that would lead me back, but it was just gone. The severed end hung from my waist. Frayed like it was chewed through, my heart sank. The laughter stopped, replaced by a growl close enough to rattle my bones. I stumbled to my feet, eyes scanning the trees. I saw movement from the corner of my eye. I then saw more movement again out of the corner of my eye. It was as if it was, I don't know, anticipating my moves, staying just out of eyesight. The air turned to ice, reeking of rot, like death itself was breathing down my neck. I backed against a tree, and there it was, the creature, stepping from the shadows. It was the thing from the clearing. The woods suddenly fell silent again. A feeling of pure dread came over me. It had a look of pure malice in its gaze and a terrible smile. Its form shimmered, a twisted mockery of life. Its eyes black voids promising torment. "You can't leave," it growled, its voice cutting through my soul. I bolted, abandoning the bike, my legs pumping despite the pain. I then spotted the yellow rope, that beautiful yellow rope. I literally screamed yes, running it quickly as I could toward it, following it to salvation. But the rope moved, retracting, into the trees like a living thing. I chased it, lungs screaming, praying for the intersection. Then I saw it, my familiar trail just ahead. Relief surged, but it died fast. The rope now led behind the tree. Slowly it stepped out from behind, the tree revealing itself in its entirety. The creature held the rope, its claws gleaming, its smile wider, dripping black. I froze, my body locked in terror. The air grew colder, the stench of decay choking me. The creature stepped closer, its form rippling, its voice whispering my fears, my doubts. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Then a sound, faint but real. A dog barking, my neighbor's mutt growing louder. The creature's eyes flickered, its smile faltering for a split second. That was my chance, my only shot to break free from this nightmare. The dog's bark shattered my paralysis. I ran, legs burning, toward the sound of safety. The creature's growl roared behind me, shaking the trees. But I didn't look back. The intersection was gone, the rope vanished, but the barking grew louder. A lifeline pulling me forward. Branches tore at my skin, my ribs screamed, but I pushed on. Then the trail opened, spitting me onto my familiar path. I woke up back on my familiar trail, the intersection now gone, the rope now gone, no trace of anything was left. I collapsed, gasping, the sun high as if no time had passed. I limped home, battered and shaking, my bike lost forever. My dad went back into the woods to look for it, but he never could find it. I told my parents I'd crashed, too terrified to confess the truth. But those eyes, that smile, they haunted me. I feel like something is missing in me, as if that thing took something. I stopped riding, stopped feeling joy. Life became a shadow, my spirit hollowed out by whatever I'd met. Months later, my dad asked about his yellow rope, and the memory of the creature holding it sent me into a panic, sobbing uncontrollably. Years passed, but the emptiness stayed. Therapy, medication, moving away. Nothing helped. At 25, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided that I'm going to go back to my childhood home, back to that familiar trail that I can still remember like the back of my hand if the intersection is there then. I'm going to go back down it. In fact, I've decided that I'm going to try to kill that thing and get back the piece of myself that it clearly took. I bought a rifle, a flashlight, and a new rope, determined to face it. I returned to the woods, the trail unchanged, but the intersection was gone. I walked the path, rifle ready, heart pounding. Then I saw it. A flicker in the air, the intersection, reappearing. I tied the rope, stepped forward, and the clearing was there, its glow faint, the air heavy. The charred tree stood, and the creature waited, its eyes glowing, its smile wider. "You're still mine," it whispered, its voice a knife in my mind. I raised the rifle, but the world spun, and I was falling, the ground swallowing me. I woke in my car, rifle gone, rope untouched. The woods were silent, but something in me had shifted. Not whole, but stronger. I hadn't killed it, but I'd faced it. I drove away, vowing never to return, but I know it's still there, waiting for another soul to wander too far. If you ever see a trail that shouldn't exist, turn back. Some places take more than you can give. It watched me every morning, a shapeless thing in my bedroom doorframe waiting for me to wake. This isn't a tale spun for thrills. It's my childhood, carved into my soul by a house that breathed with malice. I grew up in a century house. I think it was 105 years old in 1985, so very, very old. It was beautiful. But I hated the vibes. They always felt nasty and sort of unclean. At 3, I didn't understand the dread that soaked those walls, but I felt it. A cold, heavy presence that wasn't human. By 8, I knew it was real, a thing that chose me. A kid in a Virginia relic built in 1880. The house was a monument to secrets, its warped beams holding stories no one dared tell. Looking at the history of the house that was built by a distant relative who owned a sawmill and local hotel, he was a bad actor from what I understand. Whispers called him a southern gangster of sorts, a man who might have spilled blood in those rooms. At some point, there was a fire shortly after the house was first erected in the 1880s, and the stairwell and the upper floor were damaged and reconstructed. No one died, they said, but the house never recovered. Tenants fled, muttering about shadows that moved, eyes in the dark. My family stayed, rooted by history, blind to the cost. Between the ages of 3 and 8, though, I would see a fuzzy, misty sort of apparition that would play peekaboo with me in the mornings as I lay in bed. It wasn't a ghost from a storybook. It was wrong. A blur that flickered like a broken signal. I'd wake, heart racing, staring at the 10F doorframe where it hovered, teasing me with its presence. I tried to shrug it off, to focus on my serial or comics, but it was always there, a silent challenge. Was it real? Was I crazy? I didn't know, but I couldn't look away. My parents didn't see it or wouldn't admit they did. Mom would glance at the stairwell, her face tight, but she never spoke of it. Dad avoided the upper floor, blaming old creaks. I learned to keep quiet, to hide my fear. But the house didn't hide. It whispered through its walls, its air thick with something alive, something watching. Maybe that guy, though, maybe he killed somebody there because he was involved in getting rid of some folks, or so it said. That history clung to me. A weight I carried even as a child, a truth I felt but couldn't prove. I started noticing patterns. The thing came at dawn, never at night, like it was bound by the light. It wasn't just a shadow. It was deliberate, a presence that knew my name. I'd lie in bed, my breath shallow, waiting for it to appear, knowing it would. The house was no home. It was a trap, and I was its prey. But I wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. The house was a living thing, its pulse hidden in the creaks and shadows. Every morning I'd wake to that fuzzy, misty sort of apparition in the 10F door frame, a silent intruder that didn't belong. At first it would be misty and become intermittently more solid, waxing and waning in its visibility like power surges. It wasn't just there. It moved, deliberate, like it was studying me. I'd grip my blanket, my eyes locked on the frame, trying to convince myself it was a dream, but it wasn't. I would count spell words, do my ABCs, later recite prime numbers, pinch myself, move about to make sure that I was awake, and I can assure you that I always was. The thing wasn't loud or violent. It was subtle, insidious. It was a misty shape of a head and shoulder, and featureless but semi-solid. I could see through it. But also it was like staticky, and would sometimes be more obvious and then sort of fade back to a less solid fog. I'd watch, frozen, as it played its game, slipping in and out of view. Also, it sort of looked like moving particles if you stared long enough, like static from TV, but more white. It was mesmerizing, almost beautiful, but it carried a weight, a pressure that made my chest tight. I called it my morning ghost buddy, a kid's way of coping, but I knew it wasn't friendly. The house had other tricks. In the attic, my playroom, the air would shift without warning. I describe it a bit like the air changed, like when you go to higher altitudes and your ears pop, or when the silence becomes audible. A shift in silence from normal silence to sort of complete and thick silence. It was a total atmospheric shift, a pressure change. I'd be building with blocks and suddenly the room would feel crowded, like I wasn't alone. I'd pause, my heart racing, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, but the feeling was enough. I learned to move carefully, to hide my fear. I somehow knew not to react like that, like I was scared, but to put my things away per usual and calmly leave like normal without freaking out or getting hurried. It was instinct, a survival trick I didn't understand. I'd walk downstairs, my face calm, but inside, I was screaming. The stairwell and the upper floor near my room were the worst, their air heavy like wading through fog. I'd take the long way to avoid them, but the house always seemed to know. My parents felt it too, I think. Dad would mutter about old houses when the floor creaked at night. Mom's eyes would linger on the doorframe like she saw something she wouldn't name. But they never spoke of it, and I didn't ask. I kept a journal instead, hidden under my bed, filled with drawings of the thing, its shapeless form, its static hum. The house wasn't just haunted. It was awake, and it wanted me to know I wasn't alone. One morning, at 6, the house revealed its truth. I woke to a silence so absolute it felt like the world had died. No sounds, no air, just a void that crushed my ears. My room was dim, the dawn light gray and sick. Then I saw it clearer than ever. The freakiest part is that it was doing the little peek thing at the top corner of the 10F doorframe, sometimes a little more than the head, and shoulders would move out and it would be an amorphous blob, but it's like there was a barrier, and it couldn't move far beyond the doorframe. It wasn't just a shadow. It was alive, its form pulsing with intent. My body froze, my muscles locked, as if the thing had chained me to the bed. It didn't feel scary, I guess, but just odd to me. It was almost like I was witnessing something, highly unusual, and it was sort of bemusing, a phenomena of sorts, I guess. But that oddness was a mask. Deep down, I felt its hunger, its gaze, a force that stripped away my courage. It was a misty shape of a head and shoulder, and featureless but semi-solid. I could see through it, but also it was like staticky. It shifted, stretching into something wrong, too long, too sharp, a mockery of form. I fought to stay grounded. I would count spell words, do my ABCs, later recite prime numbers, pinch myself, move about to make sure that I was awake, and I can assure you that I always was. But the thing didn't care. It leaned closer, testing the barrier at the doorframe. Its static from TV, but more white form swirling, pulling at my mind. The room darkened, the walls closing in. The hair of my arms would actually stand up like fear or static in the air, and my ears would start to ring too. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, my breath stolen by its presence. My mind raced to the stairwell in the upper floor, the fire that had scarred them. Was this what the flames had birthed? A thing that lived in the house's veins, feeding on my fear. I felt its attention, not eyes, but a weight, peeling back my thoughts. Then it stopped. The silence lifted, the air warmed. The thing gone. I gasped, tears streaming, my hands shaking as I slammed the door shut. I never saw it at night or dusk, or any time during the day if I took a nap. This was only in the morning hours between dawn and, say, 10 or 11 a.m. I didn't tell anyone. How could a kid explain that? But I knew it was real. The journal under my bed gained a frantic entry. It's alive. It wants me. I closed my door every night after that, a desperate shield. The house let me think I'd won, but I felt its pulse, its patience, waiting for me to slip. That morning changed me forever. The house didn't just scare me, it marked me, its shadow a stain I couldn't wash away. I stopped lingering in my room, afraid of what the dawn might bring. The attic, my old playroom, was off limits. Its complete and thick silence a warning I couldn't ignore. The hair of my arms would actually stand up like fear or static in the air, and my ears would start to ring too. I'd sit downstairs, my journal clutched tight, sketching the thing's form, trying to trap it on paper. But it was never just on paper, it was in me. My parents saw the change. "You're too jumpy," Dad said, his voice sharp. I wanted to tell them about the misty sort of apparition, the 10F door frame, the way the house felt alive. But I didn't. Kids don't have words for that terror. Instead, I kept my door closed, my fear hidden. Eventually, I just stopped seeing. It too could be because I started closing my bedroom door at night as I got older. and wanted privacy, but I'm not so sure. The house didn't stop, though. The stairwell and the upper floor pulsed with that wrongness, a reminder of the fire shortly after the house was first erected in the 1880s. I dug into the house's past, piecing together stories from family and faded records. The Southern gangster who built it had left a legacy of blood, whispers of crimes buried in the walls. A maid had fled, screaming about a watcher no one believed. I believed her. I'd felt it, seen it. The house wasn't just old. It was a prison holding something that didn't belong. I started hearing things, faint static like a radio left on, echoing in my skull. My toys in the attic would move, arranged in patterns I didn't make. I burned them, too scared to touch them. We moved out in my teens. The house burned down in the 90s, an electrical fire, they said. I thought it was over. But the memories clung to me. In new homes, I'd hear that static, see flickers in doorways. Was it the thing or my mind broken by fear? I researched hauntings, desperate for answers. Some called it a ghost, others a demon. I didn't care. I just wanted to know why it chose me, why it stayed. Years later, I visited the empty lot where the house stood. The air was heavy, the ground cold. I stood where my room had been, half expecting the misty shape to appear. Nothing did, but I felt it. A whisper of dread, a gaze from nowhere. The house was gone, but its mark wasn't. I'd carried it all along, a piece of me forever tied to that cursed place. I'm grown now, but the house lives in me. Its nasty and sort of unclean weight, a shadow I can't shake. I don't leave. Doors open at night. I listen for static, brace for the complete and thick silence that defined my childhood. The thing in the 10F doorframe didn't just scare me, it reshaped me, teaching me fear that lingers in my bones, that questions reality itself. But it also taught me resilience. I faced it, a kid against the impossible, and I survived. I've spent years chasing answers. Appalachian folklore speaks of spirits tied to ancient land, of rituals that tear the veil between worlds. The Southern gangster, the fire shortly after the house was first erected in the 1880s. They're pieces of a puzzle I can't solve. The maid who fled, the tenants who ran, all felt the misty sort of apparition, the watcher that claimed the house. I don't know if it was a ghost, a demon, or something older. I know it was real. In dreams, I see the 10F doorframe, the misty shape with its moving particles like static from TV but more white. It doesn't speak, but I feel its hunger, its patience, its claim. I wake, heart pounding, the air too heavy. I've built a life beyond that house, but every creak, every shadow pulls me back. Did it follow me, or did it mark me, a piece of me bound to that ground? I shared my story with a historian friend who found records of unnatural events tied to the stairwell and the upper floor. She said the Appalachian history, older than settlers, holds tales of watchers, things that choose their prey. Maybe I was just unlucky, or maybe it saw something in me. This isn't just my story, it's a warning. Old houses aren't just wood and stone. They hold secrets, things that wait for you to notice. If you feel eyes in the dark, a shift in silence, don't ignore it. I somehow knew not to react like that, like I was scared, but to calmly leave like normal. Don't show fear, don't stay, run, and don't look back. The watcher doesn't forget and it doesn't let go. What would you do? Would you close the door, pray it passes? Or would you face it knowing it might claim you? I made my choice, and I'm still paying. The house is ash, but the misty shape lives in me. A reminder that some doors, once opened, never close. Trust your instincts, because the things that watch in the dark are real, and they're waiting for you. What if your family's home could steal from you? Not just objects, but your sense of reality. At 9 years old, I left my sandals in our ancestral house in Pennsylvania, only to watch them vanish without a trace. We searched every inch, nothing. The next day, they were back, mocking us from the exact spot we'd checked. Years later, my vape pen pulled the same trick. Gone forever, like the house had swallowed it whole. My grandfather swore our ancestors were behind it, keeping me tethered to the land. But why me? Why my things? This isn't just a house. It's a mystery that's haunted my family for generations, and it's not done with me yet. Stay with me because this story will make you question what's real and what's watching from the shadows. In the heart of rural Pennsylvania, our family's old house stands like a sentinel of the past. Built in the 1890s by my great-great-grandfather, it's a weathered wooden haven filled with echoes of history. The walls are lined with old photographs, some ancestors we know, others strangers with eyes that seem to pierce through time. Every summer, we'd escape to this retreat just 8 miles from a shimmering lake, where the days were filled with laughter and the nights carried a quiet weight. This house, with its creaky floors and musty air, will one day be mine, passed down to the eldest grandchild as my great-great-grandfather decreed. As a kid, I was drawn to the place, despite its quirks. I've always felt a deep connection to my ancestors, their lives etched into the very beams of the house. My grandfather would spin stories of our kin, hard-working farmers and artisans who tilled this land since the 1700s. But there was always an undercurrent, a sense that the house held more than memories. The air felt charged, like it was waiting for something. I'd catch myself glancing at those photos, wondering who was staring back. At 9, I didn't have words for it, but I felt it. A presence, subtle but undeniable, as if the house was alive, watching, deciding who belonged. That summer, it chose to show me just how real that feeling was, starting with a pair of sandals that refused to stay lost. It was a sweltering July weekend, the kind where the heat pressed against your skin, making every breath feel heavy. We'd spent the day at the lake diving into cool water and chasing minnows, but as we piled into the old house, a strange tension settled over us. The living room with its ancient fireplace was my favorite spot to unwind. I was 9 or 10 and I tossed my sandals by the fireplace, a hulking brick relic that hadn't seen a flame in years. They were cheap blue flip-flops, scuffed from a summer of adventures, but I loved them. I kicked them off without a thought, never imagining they'd become the center of a mystery. That night, the house felt restless. The silence was too thick, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. The photos on the walls, those nameless faces, seemed to loom larger in the dark. I drifted to sleep but woke with a start, my heart racing for no reason I could name. Morning came and it was time to pack up. I reached for my sandals. They were gone. We tore the house apart, my parents, my grandfather, and me, checking every corner, every closet. The house isn't sprawling. It's a modest place with few hiding spots. My mom lifted cushions, my dad scoured the porch, and my grandfather even climbed to the attic, but the sandals were nowhere. Frustration turned to unease. How could something so simple just vanish? My parents exchanged glances, their voices hushed, as if they sensed the house was listening. I had to make the 2-hour drive home barefoot, my feet pressing against the cold car floor, feeling oddly exposed. The loss stung more than it should have, like the house had taken something personal. My grandfather stayed behind for another day. He didn't say much when he called my mom the next morning, but his voice carried a weight. He'd woken up to find my sandals right by the fireplace, exactly where I'd left them. They didn't want her to leave, he said, half joking, half serious. I was stunned. We'd checked that spot a dozen times. How could they reappear like that? My parents laughed it off, but I couldn't. The house had played a trick and I was the target. I've always been the only one whose stuff goes missing there. My cousins, my parents, none of them had stories like this. It felt personal, like the house, or whatever lived in it, had singled me out. Was it my ancestors? Those stern figures in the photos holding me close? Or was it something else using my belongings to send a message? That summer marked me, planting a seed of doubt that's never left. Years later, I returned to the old house, now with my daughter, Lily, and my friend Sarah in tow. The place was unchanged. Same dusty air, same unsettling photos watching from the walls, like oblivious to the house's quirks, darted around, her energy a stark contrast to the stillness. Sarah and I settled in the kitchen, sipping coffee and catching up. I pulled out my vape pen, a habit I'd picked up to ease stress, and set it on the table. I placed it right there on the kitchen table before stepping outside to load the car. It was a mundane moment, nothing to suggest what was coming. Outside, the air was crisp, the lake's distant shimmer visible through the trees. We loaded the car, laughing about old times, but I couldn't shake a nagging unease, like the house was sizing us up. Back inside, I reached for my vape pen. It was gone. We searched the entire house, every drawer, every shelf, but it was nowhere to be found. Lily crawled under the table. Sarah checked the counters, and I even looked in the pantry, half expecting it to be misplaced. Nothing. The déjà vu hit hard. This was the sandal incident all over again. Sarah tried to lighten the mood, joking that the house was allergic to modern stuff. But I wasn't laughing. My grandfather always said our ancestors didn't drink or smoke, and I wondered if they disapproved of my vaping. The thought felt silly, but the house had a way of making silly things feel real. We've been back half a dozen times since, and that vape pen has never turned up. It's not just the loss, it's the pattern. I'm the only one whose stuff goes missing in that house, always have been. My daughter's toys, Sarah's phone, they're always where they should be. But me, I'm the target every time. The more I thought about it, the heavier the questions grew. Why does the house pick on me? Is it because I'm set to inherit it? Tied to its legacy in a way no one else is? Those photos, those strangers staring back, were they judging me? Testing me? The house felt like a living thing, its walls holding secrets I wasn't ready to uncover. I started asking my grandfather about our family, piecing together stories of our kin. He'd always said the house was special, a place where our ancestors' spirits lingered. But what if they weren't? Just lingering? What if they were watching, waiting, deciding what I could take with me? The old house is more than a building. It's a piece of my soul, tangled in history and unanswered questions. I've spent years researching our family, digging into the lives of those faces in the photos. My grandfather's stories paint a picture of resilience, but also something deeper, a bond with the land that feels almost sacred. Yet every time I step through that door, I'm reminded of the sandals, the vape pen, the way the house seems to choose what I can keep. I love this house, always will, but it's a love laced with unease. I'm the only one who loses things here, and I can't help but wonder why. Is it because I'm the one destined to carry this legacy forward? The house will be mine one day, and with it, whatever secrets it holds. Those unexplainable moments, the sandals reappearing, the vape vanishing, aren't just quirks. They're messages, hints of a presence I can't name. My grandfather believed it was our ancestors, watching over us, guiding us. But I'm not so sure. What if it's the house itself, a keeper of our past, demanding I stay connected. Here's what haunts me. What does the house want from me? Is it a guardian preserving our family's story? Or is it something else? Something that takes to remind me I'm not in control? I keep going back, drawn by love and curiosity, but each visit leaves me with more questions. If you've ever had something vanish, only to reappear like it was, never gone, you know the feeling. That chill of knowing something's off. Share your story in the comments. Have you felt a place pull you in, refuse to let go? And if your home could take from you, would you fight to understand why or walk away? Stick around for more stories that'll make you question what's real. You won't want to miss what's next. The night was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Walking alone on a pitch-black road, miles from anyone, I thought I was safe. Then it came, a scream that froze my blood, a yell that very, very distinctly sounded like an old man crying, "Help!" But out here, in the middle of nowhere, there shouldn't be anyone. My grandma's property is settled all the way in the back of the woods at the end of a long, unpaved road. I've lived here my whole life, and I know these woods don't forgive mistakes. That scream wasn't human. Or was it? What I heard that night, and what I saw after, changed how I see the dark forever. Stick with me, because this isn't just story. It's a warning you need to hear. I've always called my grandma's place home. My grandma's property is settled all the way in the back of the woods at the end of a long unpaved road. Along with being comically bumpy, it also has a history of hauntings that were passed between family members over the years. It's at the end of a winding unpaved road, swallowed by dense woods that block out the stars. The nearest neighbor is a mile away, and the only sounds at night are crickets and the occasional owl. I myself was somewhat skeptical of these tales, not because I'm not a believer of the paranormal, but because my uncle and father have a habit of being very exaggerative. But living out here, you learn to trust your instincts. That night, I was walking back from the road's entrance where I'd just said goodbye to my boyfriend, Jake. Jake had to park at the road start since his parents didn't want their car bouncing over the ruts. As such, my boyfriend had to walk to my house from the entrance of the road, since his parents didn't want to risk damaging their vehicles on the aforementioned bumpy road. We'd spent the evening talking, laughing, and ignoring the world. I decided to tell him about the property's haunted history, from the silver buried on four corners of the property, to appease a supposed deer spirit, to the knocking on the counters at night. I spilled every tale that I'd ever heard. Jake, though, got serious. He warned me not to do one thing: don't whistle at night. He'd had his own creepy experience out here, something he wouldn't talk about. But his warning stuck with me. I started walking back, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air was cool, the sky a dull blue despite being past 8:30 p.m. On my way back, I began to sing a tune. I wasn't whistling. Jake's warning was fresh, but I hummed softly, trying to shake the unease of being alone. Then it hit me. A yell that very, very distinctly sounded like an old man. Later, once I got home, I'd realized that there was a word in that yell too: help. It came from the bushes ahead, sharp and desperate, echoing through the trees. My heart stopped. There was no one out here, no houses, no campers, just me in the woods. I froze, scanning the darkness, my phone's flashlight trembling in my hand. Who was screaming? And why did it feel like a trap? My first instinct was to run, but my legs wouldn't move. That scream, "Help!" rang in my ears, too clear, too close. Later, once I got home, I'd realized that there was a word in that yell to help. I fumbled with my phone, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark, but it only made the shadows deeper. The bushes where the sound came from were still, no movement, no sign of anyone. I called out, "Well, hello? Is someone there?" My voice cracked, swallowed by the silence. Nothing answered. but the air felt heavier, like someone was watching me from the trees. I forced myself to walk forward, heart pounding, checking every step. There was no possible way that there could have been an elderly man on or near the road. My grandma is the only person that lives on that end of the road. Yet the scream was so real, not an animal, not the wind. I reached the spot, a cluster of overgrown bushes on a small ridge. There, in the dirt, I saw something. A single shoe, old and weathered, half buried in the mud. It wasn't mine, wasn't Grandma's, and Jake hadn't come this far. My stomach twisted. Had someone been here? Was this a prank or something worse? I bolted back to the house, locking the door behind me. Grandma was on her couch, smoking a cigarette, her eyes narrowing as she saw my face. "You okay, Sarah?" she asked. I didn't want to scare her, so I mumbled something about hearing an animal. But when I called Jake, my voice was shaking. My boyfriend, after hearing the story, said it was meant to be a lure. But for what me death, all that fun stuff. He sounded spooked. Said he'd heard stories from hunters about voices in these woods. Cries that draw you in. It's like a trap, he said. I laughed it off, but his words stuck. That shoe, the scream, it didn't add up. I lay awake that night replaying the sound, wondering if I'd imagined it. But deep down I knew I hadn't. Something was out there, and it had called to me. The next morning I went back to the spot, determined to make sense of it. The woods looked different in daylight, less menacing, but the unease lingered. I found the shoe again. A men's work boot, size 10, caked with dirt. No tracks, no blood. Just that lone boot, like it had been dropped from the sky. I took a picture and sent it to Jake, who texted back, "Don't go back there alone." But I had to know. I myself was somewhat skeptical of these tales, not because I'm not a believer of the paranormal, but because my uncle and father have a habit of being very exaggerative. Still, this wasn't a story. This was real. I asked Grandma about the road's history. She sighed, lighting another cigarette. Along with being comically bumpy, it also has a history of hauntings that were passed between family members over the years. She told me about old rumors, hikers going missing, hunters hearing voices, even a kid who vanished in the 90s never found. "This land's got secrets," she said. "Best not to poke at 'em." I pressed her about the scream, but she shook her head. "Woods play tricks, Sarah, let it be." But I couldn't. That help was burned into my brain, a plea I couldn't ignore. I started digging online, searching local forums and news archives. There wasn't much, just a few articles about missing persons cases, all unresolved. One story caught my eye. In 1987, an elderly man, a hermit named Walter Grayson, disappeared near our road. He'd lived in a shack deep in the woods, avoiding people, but hunters said he'd scream for help to lure trespassers away. No one knew why, and his body was never found. The dates lined up with Grandma's stories, but it was too long ago. Could that scream have been him, or someone else lost out there? I went back to the road that evening, this time with Jake. We brought flashlights and a hunting knife just in case. The air was thick, the woods unnaturally quiet. We found the spot again, but the boot was gone. In its place was a scrap of cloth, torn and faded, like part of an old shirt. Jake grabbed my arm. "This wasn't here yesterday," he whispered. We searched the area, finding nothing but more questions. Then as we turned to leave, we heard it, a low moan, not quite help, but close, coming from deeper in the woods. Jake pulled me back. "We're not following that," he said, his voice firm. "My boyfriend, after hearing the story, said it was meant to be a lure, but for what me death, all that fun stuff." I wanted to argue, but the fear in his eyes stopped. We ran back to the house, hearts racing, the moan fading behind us. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like a voice. I kept thinking about Walter Grayson, the missing kid, The boot, the cloth. Was someone out there, hurt, needing help? Or was Jake right? Was it a lure? The not knowing was worse than the fear. I started locking my windows, checking the doors twice, something I'd never done before. Grandma noticed, but she didn't ask. She just handed me her old rosary and said, "Keep this close." I wasn't religious, but I took it. Weeks passed, but the scream never left me. I stopped walking that road at night, started driving to meet Jake instead. I myself was somewhat skeptical of these tales, not because I'm not a believer of the paranormal, but because my uncle and father have a habit of being very exaggerative. But skepticism didn't erase what I'd heard, what I'd felt. The woods felt different now, like they were holding their breath, waiting for me to slip up. I kept the rosary in my pocket, a small comfort against the dark. I told a few friends about the scream, hoping for answers. Most laughed it off, foxes, they said, or my imagination. But one, a guy who'd grown up nearby, didn't smile. He said his dad, a park ranger, had heard similar cries in the 80s, always at night, always leading to dead ends. "It's the woods," he said. "They take people." He didn't elaborate, but his words chilled me. I started noticing things. A strange dent in the mailbox, like someone had hit it. A faint smell of smoke near the road, though no one burned leaves that season. Small things, but they added up, making me question my own sanity. I went to the library, pulling every record I could find on the area. There were more stories than I'd expected. Missing hikers, unexplained screams. Even a police report from 2001 about a woman who swore she heard an old man crying for help, only to find nothing. The report noted her car was scratched, deep gouges no animal could make. I thought about the boot, the cloth, the moan. Was it one person lost and desperate? Or something else using that cry to draw people in? My boyfriend, after hearing the story, said it was meant to be a lure, but for what me death all that fun stuff. Jake's warning felt truer every day. I confronted Grandma one night, showing her the library records. She looked tired, older than I'd ever seen. "Some things you don't question, Sarah," she said. "You just survive them." She admitted she'd heard things too. Knocks, whispers, once a scream like mine. She'd never told me because she didn't want me to leave. This was her home, her history, but she gave me her blessing to move if I needed to. I haven't yet, but I'm saving up, planning to get a place closer to town. The woods aren't my home anymore. This experience taught me something. The world isn't as safe as we think. Out there in the quiet places, things happen that don't make sense. A yell that very, very distinctly sounded like an old man shouldn't have been on that road, but it was, and it changed me. Trust your gut when it tells you to run. Check on the people you love, make sure they're safe, and don't ignore the signs. If I'd dismissed Jake's warning, if I'd followed that scream, I might not be here. I'm sharing this because you need to know. Danger doesn't always look like danger. It can sound like a plea, feel like a chill down your spine. Have you ever heard something in the dark that didn't add up? A voice, a sound, something that made you question reality. Tell me in the comments. Your story might save someone else. And if you want to hear more about the things that haunt us, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. The world's full of mysteries, but we can face them together. Stay sharp, stay safe, and don't follow the screams. It's 2 a.m. You're lying in a creaky bunk in a dark dorm, surrounded by the snores of your friends. The world is silent, except for the faint hum of crickets outside. Then you see it. A figure standing in the shadows, staring at your bed, motionless like a statue carved from nightmares. You blink, heart pounding, and realize it's not your friend. It's something else. My name's Lucas, and in the summer of 2005, at a remote camp in South America, I saw something that's haunted me for nearly 2 decades. This is my story, and it's not for the faint of heart. I'm from a small country in South America and attended a religious school every year. You go to this sort of spiritual getaway in a camp that's situated in an open field next to a small river and this sort of forested mountain area. The camp was called El Refugio, nestled in a valley where the air always felt heavy, like it carried the weight of the past. Said place is beautiful, but gives off an off vibe, I guess, almost like it's lost in time due to its very old structures. The cabins were ancient, built decades ago, their wood warped and creaking. Locals whispered about the area's history, a brutal war in the 1800s that left the nearby town in ashes, and stories of restless spirits lingering in the forest. I was skeptical, more focused on hiking and campfires than ghost tales. That summer was my last year at the camp, a bittersweet farewell to high school. After a long day, all of my class was tired from hiking the forest next to the camp after dinner, and a short stay at the campfire, we were sent to bed. Our group was small, just 6 guys, and we had the whole dorm hall for us, and that was pretty sweet. The dorm was a long, narrow building with rows of bunks, the kind of place where every sound echoed. Creaking floors, dripping faucets, the wind rattling loose shutters. We sprawled out on the top bunks, joking and laughing in the dark, our voices bouncing off the walls. Eventually, exhaustion took over and I drifted off, lulled by the rhythm of my friend's breathing. But something woke me. My eyes snapped open, my heart already racing before I knew why. The dorm was pitch black, the only light a faint sliver of moonlight slipping through a cracked window. I lay still, listening, trying to pinpoint what had jolted me awake. That's when I saw it, a silhouette at the edge of my bunk standing perfectly still, staring down at my friend Diego's bed across from me. My blood ran cold. I thought it was one of the guys, maybe sleepwalking, but the way it stood, so rigid, so wrong, sent a chill down my spine. I held my breath, waiting for it to move, to say something, anything. It didn't. I stared at the silhouette, my heart hammering so loud I was sure it would hear. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, its head tilted slightly, fixated on Diego's bed. I woke up at what I assume was between maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I rose my head from the sheets to see my best friend in his bunk in front of me, also raising his head. Across from me, my best friend Mateo was awake too, his eyes wide, locked on the same spot. He nodded toward Diego's bunk, his face pale in the moonlight. I followed his gaze, my stomach twisting. I turn, I see the silhouette of my classmate, just sort of standing and staring at his bed. I whispered, "Diego?" No response. The figure stayed frozen, its outline sharp against the dim light. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Was it a prank? Diego was known for pulling stunts, but this felt different, too still, too eerie. I leaned forward, my bunk creaking, and that's when I saw it. I see the silhouette crouch and notice that my classmate was fully asleep in his bed. Diego was in his bunk, fast asleep, his chest rising and falling. The figure wasn't him. My breath caught, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. I looked at Mateo, his eyes mirroring my panic. Whoever or whatever this was, it wasn't one of us. We didn't speak, didn't dare. The air in the dorm felt thick, like it was pressing down on us. I clutched my blanket, my mind racing for an explanation. Maybe a counselor checking on us. But why stand like that, silent and unmoving? The figure crouched lower, its head tilting as if studying Diego's sleeping form. My pulse pounded in my ears, every instinct screaming to run, but my body was frozen. Mateo reached out, his hand shaking, and tapped my arm. We locked eyes, a silent agreement. Don't move, don't make a sound. Minutes dragged on, each second an eternity. The figure stayed crouched, its gaze never wavering. I kept expecting it to turn, to look at us, but it didn't. The dorm was deathly quiet, the usual night sounds, crickets, wind, gone like the world outside had stopped. I glanced at the other bunks, hoping someone else was awake, but the guys were out cold, oblivious. I wanted to yell, to wake them, but fear glued my tongue. What if it heard me? What if it came for me next? All I could do was watch, pray, and hope it would leave. The moonlight shifted, casting long shadows across the floor, and for a moment I swore the figure flickered like a bad TV signal. Then it stood, slow and deliberate, and I braced myself for whatever came next. The figure stood tall again, its silhouette sharp and menacing in the dim light. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Mateo's hand gripped my arm, his nails digging into my skin, grounding me in the terror. Almost at the same time, my friend and I react and look at each other wide-eyed. Both of us cover ourselves in our sheet, doing our best to fall asleep again. We pulled the sheets over our heads, like kids hiding from a monster, hoping if we couldn't see it, it couldn't see us. My breath was hot and shallow under the blanket, my body trembling. I kept waiting for footsteps, for the creak of the floor, for something to break the silence. Nothing came. I don't know how long we stayed, like that minutes, maybe an hour. My muscles ached from staying so still, my mind racing with questions. Was it gone? Was it ever really there? I wanted to check, to peek out, but fear kept me pinned. Mateo's breathing was ragged beside me, and I knew he was fighting the same battle. We were trapped in our own heads, too scared to move, too scared to speak. The dorm felt like a tomb, the air heavy with something I couldn't name. I kept replaying the figure's movements, the way it crouched, the way it stared, like it was studying Diego, like it knew something we didn't. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I eased the sheet down, just enough to see. The dorm was empty. No figure, no shadows, just the faint glow of moonlight and the soft snores of my friends. I exhaled, my body sagging with relief, but the fear didn't leave. Mateo peeked out too, his face ghostly pale. "Is it gone?" he whispered, barely audible. I nodded, but I wasn't sure. The room looked normal, but it didn't feel normal. The silence was too thick, the shadows too deep. We lay back down, eyes locked on the ceiling, too wired to sleep. Every creak of the bunk, every gust of wind sent my heart racing again. When morning came, the dorm buzzed with the usual chaos, guys laughing, packing for the day's hike. Somehow we eventually managed to do so, but the next morning I went straight to my friend, and before I could finish asking if he saw it too, he just interrupted with a yes. I pulled Mateo aside, my voice low. "You saw it, right?" He nodded, his eyes haunted. He told me exactly what he saw. It was the same thing. The same figure, the same crouch, the same chilling stare. We stood there, shaken, trying to make sense of it. Diego overheard us and laughed, thinking we were messing with him. "You guys are nuts," he said, but his grin faltered when he saw our faces. We didn't push it. How do you explain something like that without sounding crazy? But we knew what we'd seen, and it wasn't a prank or a dream. It was real, and it was wrong. The rest of the camp passed in a blur. Mateo and I stuck close, our eyes darting to every shadow, every dark corner. We didn't talk about the figure. Again, not openly, but it hung between us like a storm cloud. The other guys noticed we were off. Diego kept joking about our ghost story, but even he stopped when he saw how jumpy we were. The camp's beauty, with its rolling fields and sparkling river, felt tainted now. Every rustle in the forest, every creak in the dorm made my skin crawl. I wanted to go home, but I also needed answers. What was that thing? Why was it there? We approached this classmate and explained it to him. Of course, he thought that we were joking, but both me and my friend remember that event to this day. Back at the dorm, Mateo and I grilled Diego, hoping he'd remembered something. Sleepwalking, a prank, anything. He swore he'd been out cold all night, and his confusion seemed genuine. We checked the dorm for clues, half expecting to find forgotten prop or a hidden door. Nothing. The bunks were solid, the windows locked, the floorboards creaky but intact. There was no way that it was one of us because we were all accounted for in our bunks. The counselors were no help either. When I hinted at something weird, they brushed it off, saying old buildings played tricks on the mind. But Mateo and I knew better. This wasn't a trick. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The dorm's walls were scarred with faded graffiti, names, dates, some from decades ago. One corner had a faint carving, a crude outline of a figure with no face. It gave me chills, but I told myself it was just vandalism. At night, I'd lie awake, listening for footsteps, half convinced the figure would return. Mateo did the same, his bunk creaking as he shifted restlessly. We didn't sleep much, surviving on adrenaline and whispered theories. Was it a ghost? A hallucination? The camp's history gnawed at me. Those war stories, the burned town. Had something lingered here tied to this place on the last day? And I confided in an older counselor, a local who'd worked at El Refugio for years. His face tightened when I described the figure. "This place has seen a lot," he said, voice low. "War, loss, pain. Some things don't leave." He wouldn't say more, but his words stuck with me. I left the camp with more questions than answers. The figure's image burned into my mind. Mateo and I promised to keep in touch, to figure it out together, but life pulled us apart. High school ended, and the memory faded, but never fully. Talking about it every now and then, or almost 7 or 8 years after it happened, every so often we'd call, rehashing that night, still searching for a reason, still coming up empty. Years later, I'm not the kid who lay terrified in that dorm. I'm an adult now, living in a bustling city, far from the quiet valleys of my childhood. But that night at El Refugio never left me. We have no idea who was standing there that night also. It wouldn't have been such a big thing if I was the only one who saw it. But the fact that my friend saw the exact same thing that I did, well, it gave me huge chills. Mateo and I still talk, though not as often. When we do, that figure comes up, a shared scar we can't erase. I hope one day that I get an explanation for what happened but somehow, I just don't think I will. I've spent years trying to make sense of it. I researched El Refugio's history, digging into old records about the war that razed the nearby town. There were stories of soldiers, families, lost in the chaos, their fates unknown. Some locals believe the valley holds on to that pain, that certain places, like the dorm, trap echoes of the past. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I can't deny what we saw. That figure wasn't a trick of the light or a tired mind. It was there, real and wrong, and it chose us to see it. The experience changed me. I'm more cautious now, more aware of the world's shadows. I don't wander into old buildings without checking the exits. Don't dismiss creaks in the night as just the house settling. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen when my gut says something's off. That night taught me that some things defy explanation, and that's okay. You don't need answers to move forward, but you do need courage to face the unknown. I've shared this story with a few people over the years, friends, family, even a therapist once. Most think it's just a creepy tale, a campfire story, but Mateo and I know better. We carry that night with us, A reminder that the world is bigger, stranger than we like to admit. I don't go back to El Refugio, but I think about it often, especially when I pass an old building or hear a strange sound in the dark. If you ever find yourself in a place that feels wrong, where the air is too heavy, the shadows too deep, don't ignore it. Trust your fear. It might just save you. Because once you see something like we did, it stays with you forever, watching from the edges of your mind, waiting for the next quiet night to step back into the light. The clock struck noon, and the cemetery office was a ghost town, except for me stuck behind a desk, waiting for a family that never showed. Then I heard it, a chuckle, low and guttural, echoing down the hall. Not a friendly laugh, but something cold, predatory, like it knew I was alone. I froze, my heart hammering as the sound grew closer. This wasn't a prank. Something was in the building with me, and it wasn't human. My name's Sarah, and I worked weekends at a small cemetery in rural Pennsylvania, a place built on the ashes of an old carriage house that burned down decades ago, taking lives with it. I worked in a cemetery that was built on the grounds of a carriage house that burned down, taking at least one human and some horses with it. The job was quiet, paperwork, scheduling burials, the occasional grounds check, but the office had a reputation. I was very, very aware of the male shadow figure who lurked around the office. You could hear him walking with a cane up and down the hall. It always put me on edge. He felt ominous and disquieting. Staff whispered about footsteps, cold spots, and that shadow. A man who never left, his presence heavy like he was watching. That Saturday I was alone, the air thick with the scent of old wood and dust. I had a burial that day and the family no-showed. I stayed late finishing paperwork, the silence broken only by the hum of the heater. Then, around midday, I heard footsteps in the lobby, sharp and deliberate, like someone pacing. I swore that I heard someone in the lobby down the hall from my office, though. But when I got there, they were gone. Checked the front door. Locked. The parking lot was empty, my car the only one there. I brushed it off, figuring it was the building settling, but my gut churned. Something felt wrong. Back at my desk, the chuckle came again, closer, from the hallway leading to the records vault. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and called out, "Who's there?" No answer, just that laugh, sharper now, mocking. My skin prickled, the air growing colder, heavier. I grabbed my keys, ready to leave, but the hallway lights flickered, casting jagged shadows on the walls. The chuckle turned into a hum, low and rhythmic, like a chant. I stepped into the hall, my flashlight beam shaking in my hand, and saw it. A shadow, tall and thin at the far end, leaning on a cane. It didn't move, but its eyes, two glints in the dark, locked onto mine. I backed away, heart racing, and ducked into the office, slamming the door. The hum stopped, but the silence was worse, pressing against my ears. I checked my phone. No signal, not unusual in this old building. The chuckle returned, now outside the door, slow and deliberate, like it was savoring my fear. I was trapped alone with something that knew exactly where I was. The cemetery wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and I was its prey. I pressed my back against the office door, my breath shallow, the chuckle lingering outside like a predator circling its kill. The doorknob rattled, slow and deliberate, as if testing my resolve. I gripped my keys, their jagged edges biting into my palm, and scanned the room for an escape. The office was small. A desk, a filing cabinet, a single window barred with iron. No way out. The chuckle deepened, now a growl vibrating through the walls. Whatever was out there wasn't just haunting this place, it was hunting me. I forced myself to think. The cemetery had always been strange. There was also a pauper's grave of unknown remains transplanted from a tiny rural graveyard there, too. Staff swore the shadow figure was tied to it. a restless spirit from the carriage house fire or the unmarked graves. I'd laughed it off, chalking it up to old buildings and overactive imaginations. But now, with that laugh echoing, I wasn't so sure. I grabbed a letter opener from the desk, its dull blade a pathetic weapon, and crept to the window. The glass was fogged, the parking lot a blur, but I swore I saw movement, a shadow shifting just beyond the gate. The chuckle stopped, replaced by footsteps, heavy and uneven, like a cane tapping the floor. You could hear him walking with a cane up and down the hall. They moved away toward the records vault, and I exhaled, my legs trembling. I had to move. The vault was down the hall, a massive room where we kept burial records, locked with a key I didn't have. I was in the giant vault that doubled as our records room. When my back was turned, the door slammed shut. I remembered that day, months ago, when I'd been filing papers and the door had closed on its own, the air turning icy. I'd brushed it off, but now it felt like a warning. I cracked the office door, peering into the hall. The lights flickered again, casting the hallway in strobe-like shadows. The vault door was ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling out. The chuckle returned, now inside the vault, low and guttural, beckoning me. My instincts screamed to stay put, but I couldn't wait here forever. I stepped into the hall, flashlight shaking, the beam cutting through the gloom. Each step echoed, my sneakers squeaking on the tile, and the air grew colder, my breath fogging. The vault door creaked, swinging wider like an invitation. I reached the threshold, the chuckle now a hum, rhythmic and ancient, vibrating in my chest. The vault was pitch black, the flashlight barely piercing the dark. I stepped inside and the door slammed shut behind me. It can only be opened with a key from the inside, and guess what wasn't on me? You as well as my cell phone. Panic surged, my hands scrabbling at the lock, but it wouldn't budge. The chuckle erupted inches away, and I spun, the beam catching nothing but empty shelves. I was trapped, and whatever was in here with me was closing in. The vault was a tomb, the air thick with the stench of mildew and something sharper, like charred wood. My flashlight flickered, the beam weak, barely illuminating the rows of dusty ledgers. The chuckle came again, now a snarl, so close I felt its breath on my neck. I spun, swinging the letter opener, but hit nothing. The darkness seemed to pulse, alive, pressing against my skin. I could meanwhile distinctly hear a man chuckling outside, though. It wasn't outside anymore. It was here, inside, with me. Backed against the door, my hands shaking, the lock unyielding. It can only be opened with a key from the inside. I fumbled in my pockets, knowing the key wasn't there. My phone useless without a signal. The chuckle turned into words, low and jagged like glass scraping flesh. You shouldn't be here. It rasped, each syllable dripping with malice. My heart pounded, my mind racing for answers. Was this the shadow figure? The spirit from the pauper's grave? Or something older, tied to the land itself? I forced myself to move, inching along the shelves, the flashlight casting wild shadows. The chuckle followed, circling, sometimes behind me, sometimes above, like it was toying with me. I tripped over a box, papers spilling, and the laughter sharpened, gleeful. I scrambled to my feet, the beam catching a glint, something metallic tucked between ledgers. A key? I lunged, grabbing it, my fingers brushing something cold and slick, like wet leather. The chuckle stopped, the air growing heavier, and I felt it. Eyes watching, boring into my soul. I jammed the key into the lock, twisting with all my strength. The door groaned but didn't budge. Sitting against the door, calculating how many hours till Monday got here, and the likelihood of the grounds guys coming into the lobby and seeing the normally open vault door was closed. My mind spun. Monday was 2 days away, no one would come. The chuckle returned, now a growl inches from my ear. "Stay," it whispered, and I screamed, slamming my shoulder into the door. It creaked but held. Desperate, I scanned the vault, the flashlight catching a vent in the corner high on the wall. It was small, but maybe I could fit. I dragged a chair over, climbing, the metal creaking under my weight. The chuckle erupted, shaking the room, and the shelves rattled, ledgers tumbling. I tore at the vent cover, my nails bending, and it gave way, revealing a narrow duct. I squeezed inside, the metal cold against my skin, the darkness absolute. The chuckle followed, echoing in the duct, but I crawled, my elbows scraping, driven by pure terror. The duct sloped downward, and I slid, tumbling into a basement storage room, the air stale but free of that presence. I stumbled to my feet, the chuckle faint now, distant. The basement door was locked, but a rusty crowbar lay in the corner. I pried it open, bursting into the lobby, the sunlight blinding. The office was silent, the vault door closed as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had hunted me and I'd barely escaped. I stood in the lobby, gasping, the crowbar trembling in my hands. The sunlight streamed through the windows, but it didn't feel safe. The chuckle was gone, but the air still carried a weight like the cemetery was watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. I checked the front door, still locked, my car still alone in the lot. I assumed it was the family and rushed out to find them. We played Ring Around the Rosies with a huge funeral home between us. Finally, I realized there were no cars in the lot besides mine. The memory hit me. I'd chased those footsteps earlier, thinking it was the family, but no one was there. Now I knew. It was never human. I needed answers. The vault incident wasn't random. It was personal. I grabbed the office logbook, flipping through entries. Staff had noted oddities for years. Footsteps, cold spots, objects moving. One entry, dated a decade ago, mentioned a groundskeeper who'd quit after hearing laughter in the vault, claiming it wanted him to stay. My stomach churned. Was this thing tied to the carriage house fire, taking at least one human and some horses with it? Or the pauper's grave, those forgotten souls buried without names? I crept back to the vault door, crowbar in hand, my flashlight steady now. The door was heavy, the lock intact, but I had to know. I wedged the crowbar in, prying it open, the hinges screaming. The vault was silent, the ledgers neat, as if nothing had happened. But the air was wrong, thick, cold, with that same charred smell. I scanned the shelves, finding the box I'd tripped over. Inside were old records, yellowed and brittle, from the cemetery's early days. One page caught my eye. A faded report about the carriage house fire, mentioning a man, a caretaker, who died trying to save the horses. His body was never identified, buried in the pauper's grave. The chuckle returned, faint, from the back of the vault. I froze, the crowbar slipping in my sweaty grip. "You found me," it whispered, the voice slithering through the dark. I backed away, the flashlight catching a shadow, tall, leaning on a cane, its eyes glinting. I bolted, slamming the vault door, and ran to the office, grabbing my bag. The chuckle followed, growing louder, echoing in the halls. I fumbled with the front door key, my hands shaking, and burst outside, the warm air hitting me like a lifeline. Jumped in my car, locking the doors, and peeled out of the lot. The cemetery shrank in my rear view, but the chuckle lingered in my mind, a promise it wasn't done. I drove home, the crowbar on the passenger seat, my heart still racing. The records, the shadow, the laughter. It all pointed to that caretaker, trapped in death, claiming the cemetery as his domain. I swore I'd never go back, but the logbook was still in my bag, and those records held more secrets. Something told me this wasn't over. At home, I locked every door, the crowbar by my bed, the logbook haunting my thoughts. The chuckle was gone, but its echo lingered, a scar on my mind. I couldn't sleep, the caretaker's story replaying. His death in the fire, his unmarked grave, his laughter trapping me in that vault. I woke up after apparently being knocked out. The sound of a dull shuffle stepped near my ear, oddly startling me. Or maybe I got a sudden whiff of the familiar leathery cologne that lingered in the clouds around the building inexplicably. By the way, I'd passed out in the vault, waking to that shuffle, that cologne, and now it followed me. A reminder of what I'd escaped. I quit the cemetery job the next day, unable to face those grounds again. But the logbook stayed with me, its pages, a puzzle I couldn't ignore. I researched the carriage house fire, finding scraps of history. The caretaker, a loner named Elias, had been blamed for the blaze, accused of negligence. His death was forgotten, his grave unmarked, his spirit left to fester. I was awakened. I wasted no time in looking up and leaving. That day in the vault, I'd felt his anger, his need to keep others in his prison. I'd escaped, but at a cost. My sense of safety, my peace. Weeks later, I met with a former co-worker, sharing what happened. She nodded, unsurprised, and told me about others who'd heard the laughter, felt the cold. The cemetery was a liminal place, she said, where the dead clung to the living, feeding on fear. Elias wasn't just a ghost, he was a force tied to the land, the fire, the graves. I burned the logbook, hoping to sever any tie, but the cologne lingered in my apartment, faint but persistent, a warning I wasn't free. I moved away, starting over, but the experience changed me. I check locks obsessively, flinch at unexplained sounds, and avoid old buildings. The cemetery taught me that some places hold more than history. They hold hunger, a need to claim those who wander too close. I worked in a cemetery that was built on the grounds of a carriage house that burned down. That fire didn't just kill Elias, it bound him, and he's still there, laughing, waiting for the next soul to trap. If you ever work in a place like that, listen for the signs. Footsteps, cold air, a chuckle in the dark. Don't ignore them, don't stay. I was lucky, but luck runs out and Elias is patient. His laughter still haunts my dreams, a reminder that some doors, once opened, never fully close. The cemetery is his now, and he's always watching, always waiting for someone new to claim. A woman's voice sang from the darkness, a haunting melody that froze my blood. But my dog saw something worse. It was 11 p.m. in a Maryland forest, and we were alone, miles from help, with only a campfire between us and the unknown. Many years ago, my nephew and I went for a camping or fishing trip out to Cumber in Maryland. There's a state campground that is located on Ponick River. This wasn't a tale I'd tell for laughs. It was real. A night that turned a quiet camping trip into a brush with something I can't explain. The sides are dispersed for the most part, and not many people were there camping. We wanted solitude, so we drove to the end of the campground to the last campsite far away from the other campers, as we could get. My nephew Ben was 14, all teenage bravado, while I, Nathan, a 38-year-old park ranger, thought I'd seen it all. We set up camp and everything was normal. It was quiet that day too, with the exception of normal sounds in the forest. The Potomac River murmured nearby, the stars bright above, and my dog Rusty, a loyal German shepherd, lounged by the fire, content. It was perfect, until it wasn't. Then it came, shattering the stillness. Then at around 10 or maybe 11, at night, we heard the sound of a woman singing in the woods. Not a song that you could recognize, it was more of a melody without words, I guess. It wasn't a radio, not a camper. It was close, maybe 20 feet away, floating through the trees. I heard it, my nephew heard it, and my dog heard it too. Rusty's ears perked, his body tense, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. It wasn't scary or ominous, but it was a little bit unsettling. My nephew heard it, and he looks freaked out. Ben's eyes were wide, his bravado gone. "You hear that?" I whispered. I asked him if he heard the woman singing, and he says I don't hear anything and I'm going to bed, which is total BS, because he's about 10 FT away from me, and it was pretty loud. His denial didn't fool me. The singing was clear, a wordless hymn that seemed to hum with intent. Rusty stood, staring into the dark, his silence louder than any bark. My dog was laying down by the fire and jumps up and starts staring into the woods. I knew then, something was out there and it wasn't human. I'd camped these woods for years, knew every sound, owls, deer, wind. This was different, a presence that didn't belong. It sounded as if it was coming from one direction though, but no direction in particular. My gut screamed to stay put, but my curiosity burned. What was singing, and why was Rusty so still? The forest held its secrets tight, but that night, it was ready to share one with us, whether we wanted it or not. The singing wove through the trees, a haunting thread that tightened around my chest. It sounded as if it was coming from one direction though, but no direction in particular. It was close yet distant, like a voice carried by the wind but born from the earth. I heard it, my nephew heard it, and my dog heard it too. Rusty, my ever-vigilant shepherd, didn't move, his eyes fixed on the dark beyond the campfire. My dog was laying down by the fire and jumps up and starts staring into the woods. His silence was deafening. No bark, no growl, just an eerie stillness that sent shivers down my spine. It was strange that he didn't bark or growl, he just sort of stood up and stared into the woods just like I did. My nephew heard it, and he looks freaked out. Ben's face was pale, his hands clenched. "What is that, Uncle Nate?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I asked him if he heard the woman singing, and he says, "I don't hear anything, and I'm going to bed," which is total BS because he's about 10 FT away from me and it was pretty loud. I grabbed his arm, keeping him close. "Don't lie, Ben, you hear it." He nodded, eyes darting to the trees, where the melody pulsed, wordless but alive. It wasn't scary or ominous, but it was a little bit unsettling. I'd camped with Rusty for years, trusted his instincts. I've camped with my dogs for years, and he was very alert to things moving around in the woods. He would have made it known to someone that they weren't welcome there. A raccoon, a deer. He'd bark, chase, protect. But this? He stood like a statue, his gaze locked on something I couldn't see. I can say for sure that nobody was hiding in those woods too. No camper, no prankster. Just us, the fire, and that voice singing from nowhere. I stood, my flashlight cutting through the dark, but the beam revealed nothing. No movement, no eyes. The forest was too quiet. The usual night sounds, crickets, owls, gone, swallowed by the melody. I've read about disembodied voices, and maybe that's what we heard. It sounded like someone maybe 20 or 30 FT away though. I'd heard tales, but Potomac spirits, old stories from rangers about voices in these woods, warnings to respect the land. I'd dismissed them as folklore, but now, with Rusty's stillness and that song, doubt crept in. I told my nephew that we should walk around and see what it was, but he just wasn't interested, and after a few minutes, it stopped. "No way," Ben said, shaking his head, his voice barely audible. I wanted to investigate, to prove it was nothing, but Rusty's behavior held me back. His ears twitched, his body rigid, like he saw something we couldn't. The fire flickered, casting long shadows, and I felt it. A presence, heavy, watching from the dark. The singing stopped, but the silence was worse, thick with anticipation. as if the forest was waiting for our next move. The silence after the singing was a void, heavy and alive, pressing against my ears. After a few minutes it stopped, but Rusty didn't relax. My dog was laying down by the fire and jumps up and starts staring into the woods. His eyes were locked on the dark, his body a statue, no bark, no growl, just that unnerving stare. It, too, was strange that he didn't bark or growl, he just sort of stood up and stared into the woods just like I did. I'd never seen him like this, and it turned my blood to ice. I've camped with my dogs for years and he was very alert to things. Moving around in the woods, he would have made it known to someone that they weren't welcome there. My nephew heard it, and he looks freaked out. "Uncle Nate, what's he seeing?" Ben whispered, his voice shaking. I asked him if he heard the woman singing and he says I don't hear anything, and I'm going to bed, which is total BS because he's about 10 feet away from me and it was pretty loud. I pulled him closer, my flashlight trembling in my hand. I told my nephew that we should walk around and see what it was, but he just wasn't interested. "No way, I'm not going out there," he said, his eyes wide with fear. I wanted to move, to confront whatever was out there, but Rusty's stillness rooted me. Then I heard it, a rustle, faint but deliberate, just beyond the fire's light. I can say for sure that nobody was hiding in those woods too, but something was there. My flashlight swept the trees, catching nothing but branches, yet the air felt charged, like a storm was brewing. I've read about disembodied voices, and maybe that's what we heard. It sounded like someone maybe 20 or 30 feet away, though. The stories of Potomac spirits flooded back. Voices, shadows, things that lured campers too curious for their own good. Was this one of them? Rusty took a step forward, his hackles raised, but still no sound. I grabbed his collar, my heart pounding. "Stay, boy," I hissed, but his eyes never left the dark. Then a flicker, a shape vague and fleeting at the edge of my vision. Human? Animal? I couldn't tell, but it was wrong. Too tall, too still. It wasn't scary or ominous, but it was a little bit unsettling. Yet that was a lie. My gut screamed danger, a primal warning I couldn't ignore. "Ben, get in the tent," I said, my voice low. He didn't argue, scrambling inside, his breath ragged. I kept Rusty close, my flashlight shaking, scanning the trees. The rustle came again, closer, and the air grew cold, my breath visible. It was a strange experience for sure, and it really has me scratching my head. I wanted to believe it was nothing, a deer, a trick of the light, but Rusty's silence said otherwise. Something was watching, waiting, and it wasn't done with us. The forest held its breath, and I knew we were no longer alone. The night left us shaken, the forest's silence a weight we couldn't shake. It was a strange experience for sure, and it really has me scratching my head. Ben barely spoke, his eyes darting to the trees even in daylight. My nephew heard it and he looks freaked out. I tried to reassure him, but Rusty's behavior haunted me. It was strange that he didn't bark or growl, he just sort of stood up and stared into the woods just like I did. That stillness wasn't normal, and it gnawed at my peace, a riddle I couldn't solve. We broke camp at dawn, the singing and Rusty's stare driving us out. I tried to find any info online about similar experiences there, but I didn't come up with anything. I scoured forums, ranger logs, anything about Potomac spirits, but found nothing concrete. I've read about disembodied voices, and maybe that's what we heard. It sounded like someone maybe 20 or 30 feet away, though. Old stories mentioned voices luring campers, warnings from the land itself, but no one had answers for Rusty's silence. I called a friend, Clara, a local historian familiar with Maryland folklore. She wasn't surprised. "The Potomac's old," she said. "I can say for sure that nobody was hiding in those woods too. But something's out there, Spirits, maybe, tied to the river. She spoke of ancient tribes, rituals that bound the land, entities that didn't take kindly to intruders. It wasn't scary or ominous, but it was a little bit unsettling. Clara's words echoed my fear. We'd crossed a line and something had noticed. Rusty changed after that night. I've camped with my dogs for years, and he was very alert to things moving around in the woods. He would have made it known to someone that they weren't welcome there. But now he'd freeze at odd moments, staring at nothing, his silence a reminder of the forest. I'd catch myself doing the same, pausing at night, listening for that melody. Once I swore I heard it, a faint hum, gone when I focused. Was it real, or my mind marked by that night? Ben stopped camping, his teenage bravado crushed. "I'm done with the woods," he told me, his voice flat. I didn't push him. The forest felt different now. It's quiet, no longer peaceful, but watchful. I kept camping, but never at that site, never alone. Rusty stayed close, his eyes scanning the dark like he knew something was still out there. It sounded as if it was coming from one direction, though, but no direction in particular. That directionless voice haunted me. A call from nowhere, a warning I'd ignored. I wondered what we'd met. Spirit? A memory of the land. Clara said some places hold on to their past, their pain, and sing to those who listen. We'd listened, and now we carried it. A chill, a shadow, a melody we couldn't unhear. The forest was waiting, and I feared. It wasn't done with us. The forest's song still echoes in me, a whisper I can't silence. It was a strange experience for sure, and it really has me scratching my head. I'm not the ranger who laughed off old stories anymore. That night by the Potomac reshaped me, taught me to listen when the world goes quiet. It wasn't scary or ominous, but it was a little bit unsettling. But unsettling is too soft a word. It was a warning, a glimpse of something ancient, and it left its mark on us all. My nephew heard it and he looks freaked out. Ben's grown now, but he avoids the woods, his fear a shadow from that night. Rusty's gone, passed from old age, but his silent stare lingers in my dreams, his eyes fixed on a darkness I couldn't see. My dog was laying down by the fire and jumps up and starts staring into the woods. I see him still, standing guard, knowing what I didn't. It was strange that he didn't bark or growl, he just sort of stood up and stared into the woods just like I did. I've dug deeper, chasing answers in Maryland's history. I tried to find any info online about similar experiences there, but I didn't come up with anything. The Potomac holds secrets, tribal rituals, lost voices, spirits that sing to the unwary. Clara says the land remembers, its songs a call to those who trespass. I've read about disembodied voices, and maybe that's what we heard. It sounded like someone maybe 20 or 30 FT away, though. But why us? Why that night? The question is a splinter, sharp and unyielding. Some nights I hear it, a faint melody, wordless, drifting through my window. It sounded as if it was coming from one direction, though, but no direction in particular. I check the woods behind my house, flashlight in hand, but find nothing. Is it the same voice, or my mind, haunted by the forest? I've stopped dismissing the unknown, started respecting the land, its boundaries. I can say for sure that nobody was hiding in those woods too. But something was there, and it saw us, chose us, sang to us. This isn't just my story. It's a lesson. The woods aren't just trees and dirt. They're alive, watching, waiting. If your dog freezes, staring into the dark, listen. If you hear a song that shouldn't be, run. The land doesn't always welcome you, and its voices aren't always kind. Trust your instincts, because what sings in the night might not let you go. What would you do if the forest sang your name? Your dog silent, the dark alive. Would you stay curious or flee, knowing some truths are too heavy to bear? I stayed, and I'm still haunted. The melody a reminder that some songs never end. Wait! The Potomac sings on, calling the next soul to its shadows. Don't answer. You've heard the stories, but what you don't know is that these aren't just tales for a chill. They're pieces of a puzzle that still isn't finished. Every town we spoke of, every lonely road, every haunted house, they're still there. They're waiting. And if you felt the hairs on your neck stand up, you've already been drawn in. What if these places aren't abandoned at all? What if they've been waiting for someone else to stumble upon them just like you? The next time you drive past that quiet road or visit that old house, ask yourself, what really happens here when no one's watching? The stories we've shared are only the beginning. There are countless others still waiting to be uncovered. So, subscribe, and come back to hear more. The next chapter is already here, and it won't let you go.